It's the last night of October, and the air, heavy with a damp cold, promises more than simple treats and tricks. The dry leaves, dancing a macabre ballet with the wind's breath, create a perennial soundtrack. My house, a 3-story Victorian, construction we inherited from my grandmother, seemed like the perfect setting for the occasion. With its walls of bricks blackened by time and windows that looked like empty eyes, it always had an aura of mystery. But on this night, the mystery transformed into something more palpable, more threatening. My daughter, Sophia, 8, was radiant. Dressed as a little witch, she skipped around the living room, her cape swaying as she brandished a tiny toy broom. "Daddy, can we go now?" she asked, with a twinkle in her brown eyes. "Calm down, little witch," I responded with a smile. "There are still a few minutes until the moon rises, and your pumpkin lantern isn't lit yet." As I adjusted the candle inside the pumpkin, the flickering light dancing in the carved innards, a strange sensation invaded me. It wasn't fear, but a kind of premonition, like an animal sensing the approach of a predator. Maybe it was just the energy of Halloween, the suggestion of something supernatural. I forced myself to ignore the feeling and focused on Sophia, who was busy with a little spell she had invented herself. When the moon, a pale and ghostly disk, finally appeared in the sky, we went out. The street was full of children in costumes, and parents, some in costume, others simply accompanying them, with their faces illuminated by pumpkin lanterns. There were laughs and cheerful shouts, but a silence stretched into the shadowed areas, where the light from the streetlights didn't reach. We decided to follow the traditional route, passing by the most decorated houses. The Miller's family had a giant spider web in the front, with a spider made of balloons that moved with the breeze. At the Petersons' house, there was an improvised cemetery on the lawn, with styrofoam tombstones and fake arms coming out of the ground. Sophia was having fun, collecting candy and distributing smiles. We arrived at Mrs. Gable's house, the last one on the street, known for being the scariest. It was a house of similar architecture to mine, but with a layer of dust and abandonment. That made it look like a specter. There were rumors that Mrs. Gable, an elderly and reclusive woman, rarely came out, and when she did, it was always to walk through her overgrown garden, muttering to herself. Her house had no Halloween decorations, just a single yellowish lamp on the porch that flickered. "Daddy, can we go there?" Sophia asked, a little hesitant, but her curiosity overcoming her fear. "Are you sure?" "It looks like no one is home," I said, trying to keep her away. But she was already running toward the rusty gate. "Mrs. Gable, trick or treat," she shouted, her child's voice echoing in the quiet of the night. No response. Suddenly the door creaked and slowly opened, revealing an impenetrable darkness. Mrs. Gable wasn't there, but a tall, thin figure, dressed in a long black coat, was standing there, his thin, pale hands holding the doorknob. His face was hidden by shadow. "Trick or treat," the figure whispered, his voice like the rustling of dry leaves. I held Sophia's hand, the sense of premonition returning in full force. The creature extended its hand, and in its palm there was a single candy, a red lollipop, which seemed to bleed in the darkness. "No, thank you. We're leaving now," I said, feeling cold sweat on the back of my neck. The figure shook its head slowly. "You can't go. You promised me a treat." "I didn't promise anything," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "Your grandmother promised, years ago. She promised that the last child to live in this house would give me a treat. And you are the last, aren't you?" I had no idea what he was talking about. My grandmother was a sensible and skeptical woman. She would never make a pact like that. But the mention of her, the mention of the house that I owned, gave me a shiver. Pulled Sophia by the hand and we ran. The figure didn't follow us, but I could feel its invisible eyes on our backs, a cold and sinister presence. With every step, it felt like the dry leaves around our feet were whispering my grandmother's name. We arrived home out of breath, closing the oak door with a bang. The tranquility of our house seemed to have been replaced by an oppressive silence. I put Sophia to bed and then went to the living room, the pumpkin illuminating the darkness. I stood there thinking about what had happened. I couldn't sleep. With every sound the house made, a creak of wood, the wind hitting the window, I flinched. The creature's voice, the rustling of the leaves, echoed in my mind. My grandmother's promise. I got up and went to the library, a room my grandmother loved and kept in perfect order. I grabbed one of her memory boxes, a dark wooden box with engravings. I opened it, revealing a treasure chest. Old photos, yellowed letters, a silk scarf. Underneath everything, there was a small diary with a worn leather cover. I started to read and my blood ran cold. My grandmother's writing in an elegant calligraphy described a nightmare she had on Halloween in 1970, a being that fed on candy and could only be appeased with the promise of a treat in exchange for a favor. My grandmother, in her youth, had promised a treat to the being for it to save the life of her brother, who was seriously ill. It saved him, but in return she would have to give the being the first Halloween candy of her last grandchild, the child who would inherit the house. I dropped the diary, the sound of the leather hitting the floor echoing in the room. The promise. The creature wasn't a monster, but a collector, and the debt was mine, or rather Sophia's. I threw myself into the armchair, my hands on my head. How could I have been so naive? The creature wanted Sophia's candy, the very first Halloween candy she had gotten. And I, in my ignorance, had taken her to Mrs. Gable's house. Suddenly I heard a noise. It wasn't the wind nor the creaking of the wood. It was a soft scratching on Sophia's bedroom window, like fingernails scraping on the glass. My heart raced. I ran to her room, the pumpkin still flickering in the living room, the only light on our path. I got to Sophia's room. She was sleeping peacefully, the candy bag beside her. But the window was open, and a tall, thin figure dressed in a black coat was standing outside, its pale hand outstretched. He wasn't the creature from Mrs. Gable's house. It was another one. The moonlight illuminated his face, and he had the face of a ghost. "You didn't give me my treat," he whispered, his voice echoing in the quiet of the room. I closed the window with force, locking it with the latch. He disappeared, but the cold presence remained. In the morning I was exhausted, the terror of the previous night still haunting me. Sophia, however, was radiant, eating one of the candies she had gotten the night before. She showed me the red lollipop, the same one the creature from Mrs. Gable's house had offered. "Daddy, the wicked witch on the street, gave me this. I thought it was so cool," she said, her voice full of innocence. I took the lollipop from her hand and threw it in the trash. "Don't eat that. It's from a stranger," I said, panic overwhelming me. The next night was even worse. The creature from Mrs. Gable's, the one I had called a collector, appeared at our window. He showed me the lollipop I had thrown away and said, "You got rid of our offer, but the debt is still here, and now it will be paid with blood, not with candy." The creature from Mrs. Gable's, now visible in all its horrible glory, had eyes that were black holes in its pale face, a thin mouth and a forked tongue that moved slowly. It smiled, a joyless smile, and its voice was like sand in a desert. "Your grandmother promised us a treat, and if you don't give it to us, your daughter will be our treat, a sweet little witch." I was paralyzed with fear, but my father's voice, the words he told me when I was a child, echoed in my mind. "Be strong, my son. Fear is just an illusion. Love is real." I took Sophia's hand and held it tightly. "We're not giving you anything," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "We don't owe you anything." The creature smiled. "And your grandmother? She owes. And you are the heir. You inherit the goods and the debts." I remembered the diary. My grandmother, in her youth, made a pact with something she didn't understand, something she thought was just a dream. And now the consequences were ours. The creature began to approach, its pale hands outstretched. I protected Sophia with my body and closed my eyes. Suddenly the pumpkin lantern in the living room, the same one I had carved with such care, fell and broke, and the flame went out. Total darkness enveloped us. When the morning sunlight finally entered the room, the creature was gone. Sophia was sleeping in my arms, her face serene. I, however, was sweating and trembling. The debt, I knew, was still there. Every year on Halloween I prepare myself. I close the windows, lock the doors, and refuse to leave the house. I burn incense and place amulets. And every year the creature from Mrs. Gable's appears, reminding me of the debt, reminding me that one day I will have to pay. And the worst part is, every year its voice gets stronger, more demanding, and its face becomes clearer. And I know I can't run forever. The only thing that keeps me sane is my daughter. I refuse to give her up, and I refuse to let my grandmother's promise define our future. But every Halloween night the doubt remains. Will I be able to protect my daughter forever, or will the creature finally get its treat? If you enjoyed this story, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories like it. Thanks for watching. and see you in the next video.